We are continuing our Lenten series, Change, in which we are looking at 7 words that can bring about change in our lives. We've talked about simple words like yes and no and thanks. And this morning, we're going to look at the very un-American word of enough. But this morning, I want to start where all good sermons start, by talking about Goldilocks and the 3 bears. I loved this story as a child. It becomes a little bit more troubling as you read it as an adult. You may remember you have to ignore those parts about breaking and entering and petty larceny and the fact that these bears somehow live in a house and talk and eat porridge. But I'm going to ask you to forget all that for this morning and instead focus on young Goldilocks' path of finding what is just right. She has to go through a lot of trial and error to figure out what works for her. She scalds her mouth on some hot porridge. She eats some cold mush before she finds that perfect bowl. She sits in a few chairs, some too hard, some too soft. She even breaks one. Tries out a few mattresses before she finds the one that's comfortable that she can take a nap in. Along the way, she damages some property, steals from some bears, makes a baby bear cry. But it's all in an effort to find that thing that is just right. That place that is somewhere between too much and not enough. And it's that effort that we find what is enough for us. Because that's what we all want, right? We all want to have enough. Enough of just about everything. We want to have enough comfort, enough security, enough savings, enough money, enough love, enough for me, enough for my family, enough for the people that I care about. But when it comes to what we need, we want to have an adequate, sufficient amount of whatever that thing is and what it may be. But the hard part is that as we grow and change throughout our life, we find that enough is a constantly moving target. What looks like enough for today is not enough for tomorrow. Day to day, hour to hour, person to person, we all have a different idea of what enough looks like. And it's temporary. I ate a good breakfast. I was full this morning, but I can tell you that when I sat down at 11 o'clock right there on that bench, my stomach did that whale call sound of, oh, lunch is coming. I know that I'm going to need more. I drank coffee before worship this morning, but I know tomorrow I'll need another 12 cups to get to this level of energy. We may get enough of a great number of different things for the moment, but our appetites will always cry out for more. You get enough, but enough is temporary. A personal example. If the 25-year-old version of myself could walk into my shed where I have my tools for woodworking, he would think to himself, you would never have to get another tool ever again. You have everything you will ever need. But 40-year-old me walks in there and goes, I could buy a couple more things. The idea of enough morphs and changes and grows as we do. As St. Mick of Rolling Stone once said, I can't get no satisfaction. Now, Mick was probably talking about something else, but his words do speak to the very human feeling of longing for more. There are biological, emotional, spiritual components to our desires. Our natural biological desire, we have to seek satiation outside ourselves. We can't self-produce energy, so we got to find some food somewhere. We can't self-hydrate. We got to find water. Emotionally, we do the same thing. We seek emotional fulfillment outside of ourselves, whether it's in romantic relationships, friendships, community, or to less helpful things like drugs and alcohol. And God calls us to spiritual fulfillment outside of ourselves in Him. We are looking for a sense of this is finally enough. We fall prey, though, to that when-then thinking we talked about last week. You remember that? That we think, when I will have enough is when I make this much money. I will have enough when I marry my partner. I will have enough when I find peace and enlightenment and I'm one with the universe. Whatever it is, we're looking for that feeling. The problem we often face in American culture is that we confuse enough with plenty. Because we aren't really looking for enough. We aren't really satisfied with enough. We want abundance. We want big old bunches. We want lots and lots, big fat stacks of cold hard cash. And we fall prey to overindulgence and gluttony and greed and lust. And we call it a feeling of safety and security when it's more than enough. And let's face it, it's not just possessions and money. It's time. We've talked about this before, but we are living in a time when people's calendars are endlessly busy. We're constantly available. We can't leave work at work. Our phones, our calendars, our responsibilities follow us home, and mornings and evenings have lost their feel. Weekends don't exist anymore because we are always at the beck and call of whatever someone else's emergency might be. We have too many activities for sane people to manage, and there comes a breaking point when all of us just want to say, enough. I can't live this way. Enough is enough. If only there was someone or something that would set some boundaries in my life. I just need someone to tell me what's too much and what's not enough. And to that and to me, I say, yes, there is the Bible. There is God. In fact, that's kind of what God does throughout the Old Testament, is he tells the Hebrew people, here are the boundaries, here are the lanes that you must live between. All these laws, all these rules that God sets for the Hebrew people, they are to keep them within the will of God. The Ten Commandments, the law, all of these things are meant to keep us in the bounds of enough. In the New Testament, we find that Jesus comes and says he didn't come to abolish that law, but to fulfill that law. And that call to love God and love neighbor is supposed to give us the boundaries that will be enough for us. These things are supposed to be the boundaries of who we are called to be, what we want, how we choose to live our lives. You know, I chose these verses from Exodus, from the middle of the Ten Commandments this morning, because if there's one area that I think we all need to say enough in, it's the relentlessly busy lives that we lead. One author I read this week said, you will always have more opportunities than you can handle. Warren Buffett, who has more money than possibly God, said that the difference between successful and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. They have good boundaries about what they say no to. We have to slow down in our pursuit for more. You cannot maintain the pace that our culture has set if you never rest. And that is not to say that there will not be seasons of busyness and craziness in their life, in any life. There always are. I'm sure that if there are any CPAs in the room, you are wondering what you are doing wasting this hour when you could be preparing someone's taxes right now. God bless you. I'm glad you took a break. I know that I can speak for Vivian and Becky too, will probably be burning the candle at both ends when it comes to Holy Week and Easter. It's just a busy time. And if you have a new baby, and we got a lot of new babies in the church, God bless you. You know, you're just surviving. Tape the windows. It's a hurricane. We understand. But those are seasons of our lives. That is not the way that our life is supposed to be all the time. But for many of you, you driven, wonderful people, you are running at a pace that is unmaintainable. You never stop racing. You never stop running. You never rest. You gave up on sleep years ago. You work 60, 80 hours a week, and even when you're home and with your family, you're not really there. There comes a point where you have to say enough, preferably before you scream it at someone you love, or you lose your job because you say it to your boss, before your nervous breakdown or your midlife crisis. It's a good time to say enough. Our whole lives as Christians are meant to be modeled after Jesus Christ, to be following after where it is that God would have us be. And in a Christ-like life, a life with God, there is rest. This is a commandment. This is a commandment that Ken read for us this morning. Not an option, not a maybe, not a you can do this when you've got time, but keep the Sabbath. On the seventh day, God rested. After 6 days of creation, God rested. And you know what I have to remind myself of from time to time, and you may want to think about this too, is in those 6 days of radical work and creativity, God looked at each and every day and said it was good. Sun, moon, and stars, earth and sea, and all the creatures in them, all of that was good. But it wasn't until the seventh day, when God rested, that he called something holy. A day of rest is the first sacred and holy thing in all of creation. That tells me that this commandment is important. This commandment that I must confess, and maybe you too probably ignore more often than any other. We think, I'll get to that later, when I retire, or after this project, or after this season. Then I'll finally get some rest. If you're feeling like you're failing in this, you're not alone. Another preacher reminded me of the words of Psalm 23 this week, a psalm that I've read so many times, but I saw it with fresh eyes this week as I was thinking about this sermon, where you hear these words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Jesus is saying, I am enough. God is saying, I am enough. I am the shepherd. I will lead you. You don't have to want for all this stuff. But the next line's the killer. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. I never thought about that word, maketh. God makes me lie down sometimes. He makes me lie down. He makes me rest. I've often told church staff and laity that you better take your vacation time, you better take your days off, because if you don't slow down, God's going to make you slow down. Sometimes we need God to tell us, enough is enough. Rest. He restoreth my soul. That's part of this whole lying down thing. It's the restoration of us. You have to have time to restore your soul. What you are doing, what you are practicing, what you are living, it either depletes you or it restores you. You cannot endlessly pour everything you are into other people and into other projects if you have nothing left for yourself. Where are you finding quiet and solitude and rest? Time for prayer, time for joy, time for hobbies, time with your family, time for simple, unencumbered fun. We have to recognize what drains us and what fills us back up. And if we're going to do that, we have to recognize the fact that God was pretty serious about the fact that he made this a regular practice. This was a weekly part of our life with God. That means you can't run on empty for months and expect to be restored over a long weekend or a 4-day trip to the beach with your family. One of my seminary professors once said, you must daily depart. You must weekly be away. You must annually retreat. You must take the time. You must create the space to be recharged and restored. We of the smartphone generation know that when we get that notification that you are at 10% battery life, it is time to plug the phone back in. In our house, we have a near panic when that happens. Daddy, where's the charger? I can't find the charger. Where's the charger? If only we reacted so unsubtly when we found ourselves at 10%. But most of us are getting that notification, but we're ignoring it. If you're not sure what that notification looks like, that you need to recharge, you need to restore your life, it looks a little something like this. Maybe you're more grumpy and irritable than normal. Some of you are just grumpy and irritable all the time. I'm saying more than normal. Maybe you're disconnected from your relationships. The things that used to bring you passion and joy don't bring you passion and joy anymore. Or maybe you're experiencing that desire to escape. You're thinking about leaving your work, leaving your family, leaving your relationships, disappearing into the witness protection program. Those are the kind of feelings that can kind of say, perhaps you are not restoring and recharging yourself. Observing the Sabbath is a way to recharge and restore our souls. It's a way for us to say to the world, to our lives, enough. Now here's the thing. Don't be a slave to legalism and rules. You do not have to sit at home all Sunday afternoon reading the Bible by candlelight. You're not Abraham Lincoln, and I'm not going to ask you to do that. The Sabbath is about rest. It's about what recharges you. It doesn't have to be Sunday. Sunday's a pretty active day for me. It's a little hard for me to rest, so my day is Friday. I love my Sabbath day. Now listen, someone's going to tell me that I'm doing it wrong. Someone's going to tell you that you're doing it wrong. Don't listen to them. They're wrong. I had a former congregant one time drive by the parsonage on Sunday afternoon as I was mowing the lawn and tell me, how could I possibly be mowing the lawn on the Sabbath? I love mowing grass. I love digging in flower beds. I love planting. It is meditative and relaxing for me. It connects me with creation, makes me feel grateful. So don't tell me I'm doing it wrong. I'm restoring my soul. And I won't tell you you're doing it wrong either. We all have practices that make us feel whole, that bring us a sense of rest and return to who we were made to be. Maybe for you it's hiking in the park or kayaking or walking on the golf course. I love grocery shopping without my children. There's no greater gift. Reading a book, spending quality time with your spouse, your family, your friends, or just the awesomeness of one of the greatest things that God ever created, the afternoon nap. Setting boundaries around these times and practices help us to stay true to who God made us to be. They make us the people that we long to be by taking care of ourselves. Jesus is a shepherd who leads us to rest. Enough is a word of holy protection for us. As most of you know, I love to do woodwork on my days off. That's my Friday. I've learned that the hard way, that it requires my full attention and concentration. I learned that by almost cutting off my thumb. I can't stop what I'm doing when I'm in the middle of a task. When buzzing saws and moving parts are there and moving fast, I love it. It sparks joy in me. But I am going to be practicing something that requires all of my attention. So when my phone rings or a text comes through or I feel my phone vibrate in my pocket, I have to let it go. Because if I get distracted from what I'm doing, I could get hurt. I have gotten hurt. If I'm not paying attention to the practice that brings me joy and satisfaction and restoration, I could lose a finger. What I am doing in that moment has to be enough. And the rest of the world has to wait. I pray that we would all see that when we pull ourselves away from the restorative, recharging practices of keeping our Sabbath, we risk losing parts of who we are. We risk injuring our souls. We were made to work and to rest. And while the work is good, the rest is holy.